Welcome everybody to our Zoom program today. This is called Lunch in the Garden, and you're looking at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Rensselaer County. My name is David Chinnery, and I work here as Extension Educator. And today we have one of our wonderful Master Gardeners, Denise Maurer. And Denise has done many programs for us over the years. All sorts of different gardening programs, art-related programs. Denise is an interior designer by trade and has a wonderful eye for color and design and form and function. So today, Denise is going to be talking about forcing branches and indoor blooms, right?
That's true.
Okay, so Denise, I'm going to hand it over to you. I guess, do you want to share your screen or how do you want to do it?
I'm going to share my screen right now. Oh, you got to allow me to do that.
Oh, I still haven't.
I thought you promoted me.
I thought I did promote you. Let's see again. I got to find you on the list here.
Here I am. Nope.
Let's see. Wait a minute.
Hang on, guys. Try now? Nope.
Okay, now we should be ready to go.
Yeah, looks it.
There we go.
You got me?
Yep, we can see your screen.
Okay, there we go. All right. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. It's a really nice sunny day to be talking about forcing flowers and bringing a little spring into our life. It's actually coming really soon. If you've had a chance to peek under the snow and ice, you might see some little sprouts coming up in your own gardens outside. But for those of us that are just passionate about flowers and needing to, it's almost like water and substance for us. We need flowers around us and plants around us. So to be able to bring in some color and to play gardener in the middle of the winter is a wonderful thing. So I'm happy to be sharing some ideas on how to do that and brighten your days, because certainly our days have been gloomy, and it's time now to bring in a little color. Here you can see some beautiful hyacinths that have been forced in hydroponically, which I'm going to be talking about the various ways that you can do this. It may be a little bit late to force blooms any other way in bulbs than hydroponically. In other words, we also plant bulbs up to bloom sooner in the winter months, but that chilling period is behind us. But hydroponically, you can still start your stems and whatnot. So let's just get into it. Okay, so some of the bulbs that are great for forcing and very easy to do are your grape hyacinths, your tulips, your normal hyacinths, daffodils, paper whites are a favorite at holiday time, as is amaryllis at holiday time. In fact, Amaryllis is just such a blockbuster sort of plant that I'm continually receiving photos from people of the blooms that their wonderful flowers are producing. So all of this brings color and life into our home, and nature is just so important to our well-being, and so it's wonderful that God made a way that we could have it at other times than what is natural. But the trick is to fool the bulbs and to think that they actually have gone into winter. And we do that by pre-chilling. Other than paper whites and amaryllis, all bulbs have to be pre-chilled. Now, bulbs that you buy locally have probably had some pre-chilling, but if you want to force them early, you're going to have to take advantage of this schedule that I put up here. If you wanted blooms in September, or excuse me, if you planted up your bulbs to bloom in January, you're going to need to do that in September. And conversely, February blooms are planted in October, March blooms in November, so on and so forth. Takes about 12 to 15 weeks of chill and then 2 to 3 weeks of bloom time. After you, what you want to do in chilling your bulbs is place them in a cool, dark spot. Refrigerator's fine. I've always got some bulbs hanging around. In fact, I took one off today. I had one sole paper white in my refrigerator, so I'm going to have a bloom in about a week there. And if you're placing them in the refrigerator, I just want to remind everybody to keep them away from any vegetables and fruits. And it's because of their ethylene gas. Ethylene causes vegetables and fruits to ripen, but they also can cause your blooms to drop earlier, and it sort of tweaks the flowering mechanics behind a bulb. So just keep them, don't put them in the same drawer as your vegetables and fruits. Surprise, I had to throw this photo in because I just came across it a couple of days ago, and this was a surprise. I had given a talk on forcing stems and flowers a couple of years ago, and knowing in advance that I was going to do it, I actually planted up this pot in the fall. I planted it in October, and then I forgot that I had planted it. It was still out in my garage. So one day leaving, I discovered the pot was sprouting greenery out of it, and in a totally dark, cold garage, it still was ready to go because I had planted it accordingly. So I brought it in. It looks a little leggy and whatnot, and you can see the bloom on the left side looks a little chlorotic because it wasn't getting any sunlight initially. But no matter what, looking leggy and a little untamed, it did so much for my mental well-being, and I was totally surprised. So I guess the reminder is, if you do pot them up in the fall, don't forget about them. Put them on your schedule so that you can move them in, so they can start the blooming process. So here again is some beautiful bulbs that have been forced into spring blooming, or winter blooming, I should say. Again, it's your tulips, your paper whites, your grape hyacinths, daffodils, and so on. And here again, hydroponic forcing. We're going to talk about planting bulbs up and hydroponically starting them. And here you see the hyacinths are started in these wonderful little bulb starting vases. I have one here on my countertop that I'll show you a little bit later. But those bulbs just sit nestled into the little upper cup. And so the water is only reaching the bottom of the bulbs, and that's all it needs. Actually, if you added more water, you would kill the bulb. It would rot out. So you just want it touching the lower part of base of the bulb, and you always want to keep it cleaned with clear water and whatnot. And the other one on the right is the tulips. And I think the tallness of the glass for the tulips is really wonderful because it keeps it from topping over. Sometimes they get a little bit too top heavy, and being that they're not nestled into a lot of soil, they could fall on you. So using tall cylinder glass vases like this are really very efficient way to show off those blooms. So waking up your bulbs. After you have given the proper chill period for your bulbs, you're going to want to move those containers to a slightly warmer location with indirect sunlight. Now, my container that I showed you earlier with the leggy flowers actually was slightly warmer because it was in my garage, but it wasn't indirect sunlight, and that's why it wasn't so bright initially. But when you do see about 2 inches of growth visible, you want to put your bulbs in a container and choose containers that will allow you to put at least 2 inches of soil or stones for hydroponically under the bulbs' roots. And here you can see some bulbs that have been potted up. And notice how they're all kept very close together. You want to situate your bulbs close together so that you'll get as many blooms as you possibly can. Again, you want to start by adding 2 inches of soil to the bottom. You don't want to use soil from your outside ground. You want to use potting soil or some sort of seed starting soil, something that is light and fluffier and will hold and drain water appropriately. Place your roots, or excuse me, place your bulbs root side down. As I said, crowd them in, then fill your container with soil, but leave the neck of the bulbs exposed as you see here. Water them well, and then you can move them into a bright, warm location, and then you just want to keep them well watered. Another fun thing to do with forcing your blooms as you're potting them up, if you've got multiple size bulbs and types of bulbs, you can gather them all together. The trick is to put the largest bulbs to the bottom of the pot and then build it up from there depending on the size of the bulb. Here you can see tulips starting to force their way up, and then hyacinths, and then grape hyacinths on the top. So after you have put your bulbs in, your first layer you want to put in your soil, then set your next layer of bulbs in, more soil, and then your final layer, and then tap into soil all around to fill out any voids. And then for hydroponic planting, you'll want to fill your container with about 2 inches of marble stones, or use special forcing vases as we talked about earlier. And I do use a number of different things for forcing, from stones and marbles, but I also use things like plastic Christmas ornaments at holiday time. And I've even been known to use pine cones. Really, the effect is to elevate the bulb and be able to have water below their base. So whatever you feel that is decorative and supports the process, feel free to use them and experiment with them. So you want to place your bulbs on top of those stones and then use some lukewarm water just to get them started, and just cover again the base of the bulb. Place it in a sunny, warm window. I love my kitchen window to do this because, like a typical garden, I'm always observing what it's doing and watching it grow. So this to me brings me pleasure because I spend a lot of time at the kitchen sink. And then you'll want to refresh your water when it's cloudy. Bacteria can form in your water, and that's not a good thing. It's not healthy. It's also unsightly. So you want to replace your water on a regular basis whenever you see it start to cloud up. And if you wish, you can drop a very small amount of bleach in the water, not too much, just a couple of drops, and that too will help keep the bacteria at bay. But the best is clean water and clean bulbs. So here's the schedule of how you can get from the chill to the thrill of the flowers. For tulips, you're going to want to start them 10 to 16 weeks before you want them to bloom. 10 to 16 weeks you want to refrigerate them or chill them, and then you'll bring them out and start the forcing, and it will take about another 2 to 3 weeks to bloom. And you can go down this entire schedule here. Paper whites, no chill period. You can set them out, and in 3 to 5 weeks you'll have blooms. I usually know that they really are about 2.5 to 3 weeks and you have blooms. I have sent this chart to David, this schedule, so he can send it out to you after the class, and you'll have this on hand on how and when to start your bulbs. If you want to have a little fun, you can try an experiment of stunting your growth. This works especially well for paper whites, who has a tendency to get very long, tall, and leggy, and then they flop over, and that's not fun and pretty. So anyway, Cornell actually came across this process many years ago, and I'm not sure how they came across it. I mean, they're always researching something. But my theory is it was at a cocktail party and somebody dumped their drink in some paper whites that were being forced. But in any case, what you do is the secret is alcohol. And just the cheap stuff. You see here, I have generic gin in the corner. You start your paper whites and your bulbs as you ordinarily do, you know, setting them on the stones or in the soil. This is really more for hydroponically, I should say. So start your paper whites the way you normally do. And when you see new growth, about 2 inches of growth, replace that water with a mixture of alcohol and water. That's 1 part alcohol to 7 parts water. So you can fill up like a quart container and have it pre-mixed. And then you're just always going to be topping off your water to make sure it's always in contact with your root base. And the alcohol will actually stunt its growth. I have done many experiments. I really should keep pictures of them so I can demonstrate, but you will shrink them or stunt their growth by about 4 inches overall. And I think that's great, especially when you're using arrangements and you want them to really look their best all the time. Okay, a few things to keep in mind. You want to keep, as I mentioned earlier, keep those bulbs and flowers away from your fruits and vegetables because of the ethylene glass. That's kind of important all the time. If you've got any flowers in bloom in your home, you want to keep them away from that. I tend to have bananas always ripening on the counter, so I have to be a little diligent in moving away orchids and things like that when they're really getting ripe. You want to give them a cooler temperature at night to prolong bloom time. Actually, the cooler temperatures are really better for things like magnolias and whatnot, because they do tend to bloom early in the spring when it is really still very cold out. And be creative with your containers and your fillers. I talked about using stones and rocks. There's black rocks, there's white rocks, there's cat's eye marbles, there's, you know, all sorts of different things you can use. And the same with containers. Be creative, pull things out of your kitchen cabinets, use some bowls and casserole dishes and jars and mason jars and all sorts of things, and just have fun with it, because it is what's going to be decorating your table and countertops. So moving on to stems, let's bring in some sunshine. And boy, I really love this yellow forsythia in bloom. This is one of my favorite parts of the year, when my husband tromps out to our forsythia bush and cuts me branches of forsythia and brings them in. And in about 10 days, voila, we've gone from bare stems to beautiful yellow, bright, encouraging flowers. So some stems that work well for branching are forsythia, cherry trees, magnolias, willows, and you can even go further into hawthorns and deutzia and other flowering shrubs. Their blooming time really depends on what it is, but I use this picture here of a former show house kitchen that I had done, and I had picked some curly willow stems from our curly willow tree and put them in this big green vase that you see here. And by the end of the 3-week show, it had bloomed. I had catkins and I had leaves coming out of my branches. So it was really a nice architectural effect for the room, but it really also brightened a lot of people's days, just seeing greenery again. So your stems can be cut after we've had about 4 weeks of cold. 4 to 5 weeks is that. So I just recommend not cutting them before January 1st. But I also will tell you that stems that you cut, say, in mid-January will take longer for the flowers to come out than if you cut them, say, in mid-February. And that's only because the process has been working outside in the cold too. You'll want to choose stems that have set buds, and here you can see in this picture the buds of the forsythia. They actually set bloom right after they bloom in the early spring. So it's one of the common things we hear from people. They'll say, how come my forsythia didn't bloom? And what happens sometimes is people will prune in the summer or, long after they have finished blooming and they've cut off the next year's round of bloom. So just, be careful of that. If you've got flowering plants outside, be careful of your pruning. But in this case, we're just talking about bringing them inside. So choose stems that have set buds on them. And then you want to cut your stem on a diagonal to increase water uptake. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for a moment so I can show you how to do that. If I can find my little cursor. Where's my cursor? Let's see, maybe I can do it here. Oh, here it is. Nope. All right, well, we'll just keep moving on. I'll do it at the end. I was going to demonstrate how to do that. So after you've cut your stems, you have a couple of ways to treat them. Because they're woody plants, they actually have a very hard wood core in the center of the stem, and you have to break that in order for water to be uptaken through the stem. So two ways to do that. One is to use a hammer or mallet to smash the ends. So after you've cut your stems, if you're still outside, you could take the ends of your stems and just sort of crush them with a mallet. That could make your water dirtier, but it certainly is an efficient and very quick way to make them ready to take up water. You also can use sharp scissors to quarter cut on the vertical at the bottom, and that's what I'm going to show you at the end when I can get back to you again. But you want to, after you've cut them at the bottoms to increase the water uptake, you're then going to set them into a vase with lukewarm water. You don't need to have a lot of water in there. 4 or 5 inches is fine. And then change your water frequently. And voila, in a few days, you will have blooms. So we're moving into the fun part of all of my talks, and that's what I call just imagine, when you can take ordinary and make them into extraordinary. So I've got some wonderful little pictures and ideas to share with you. And here you see the wonderful early flowering star magnolia that is being forced into bloom in the spring. Now, again, a star magnolia tends to bloom when it's very, very cold out. It's kind of a touchy thing outside. You don't want frost or snow after they've started to bloom. So when you do bring them inside, you want to keep them in a cooler room while they are developing their buds. And also at night, if you can move them to a cooler location, that would be best to maintain the blooms, to extend the bloom time on them. On the right, we have crocus that has been potted up in just simple cereal bowls. Those bulbs have been set in advance of blooming and potted up, and just for decorative purposes, they added a touch of moss to the top edges. But what fun to see them come up. These are also great little projects to do with our children and our grandchildren, because it really introduces them to the science of gardening. And down on the bottom, some great Amaryllis, a variety of colors. They are really the star of flower forcing. Amaryllis is one of the bulbs that you can actually continue to force year after year if you choose to. There are great, we have instructions in our office that we can send you, but basically you set them out, you pull them out of the darkness about 8 weeks before you want them to bloom, and you water and fertilize regularly. And voila, in about 8 weeks, you will have amaryllis blooms, and they will continue to send out new shoots of flower bulbs. Now, if you wish, you can also cut the bulbs from the amaryllis and use them as cut flowers. They do make wonderful cut flowers and vases, as you can see they've done here. After the amaryllis has bloomed, you want to just take care of it like your regular house plants. And then in August, you start to withhold water from it for about a month, and then you put it into dark and bring it out again. All that's on that schedule that I said David can send out afterwards. On the right is your grape hyacinths. Grape hyacinths are really fun to grow because even outside, they will send off some of their greenery in the fall, and they'll send it off in the spring. I like to use grape hyacinths outside. I'm getting off the topic a little bit. I like to plant them where I've got other bulbs planted because they will show me the way and remind me I have something below there so I don't inadvertently dig something up. But inside, they're just so much fun. They're petite and delicate. And again, they have used different containers, but unified it by using all white containers. And just so how pretty this is, just all grouped together. And notice that they vary the heights and everything. That's one of the things I usually stress in my talks and displaying flowers, is you want to have different heights of everything. And down below, you can see some different flower forcing vases being used to show off the hyacinths. And they're using that height technique as well. It just creates interest. Paper whites here, again, on the right, you can see them just starting to put out their buds. And this is that 2-inch marker. So if you wanted to replace your water with that 1 part alcohol and 7 part water, you will stunt their growth and they will not get as leggy as you see them in the left side, where they're about 15, 16 inches high. But it doesn't affect the blooms. You will have miniature blooms and it's just really fun. Nice, again, nice little science experiment. But again, notice that they're grouping these items together, they're varying the heights, and they're considering not only the flowers themselves, but what they're engaged in. And that's what makes them truly decorative and beautiful inside your home. Tulips that have been set hydroponically, the ones on the right remind me of sundaes. I'm not sure why, but I just see a little sundae there. Maybe it's because they're in sundae glasses. But that, and here they've been planted in soil. You'll have to be careful if you do plant your bulbs with soil in glasses because there is no drainage. So you're going to be watering more sparingly if you've got them in a container with no drainage. But again, you see that it doesn't take a lot of water. It just needs to have a little bit of contact, a little bit of sunlight, and voila, you can have blooms inside. Other stems that force well, on the left, you see cherry blossoms that are opening up beautifully, and just the promise of spring. It's just so enlightening. Magnolias, a different magnolia over here on the right. And magnolias are great because they always open up, well, even like forsythias and cherry, they open up before their leaves open. And so we get that burst of spring. But boy, if we can move that time frame up and do it inside, I just think there's nothing like it. More ideas for displaying your paper whites and whatnot. If they do get leggy, as you see in the bottom right area, you can tie them up with ribbons, or you can start them in taller vases, as you see on the left side. That photo actually is from one of my gardens, but I use taller containers and set the bulbs down low in the container, and so therefore they provide some support as they're growing up. On the upper right, where you see the reindeer moss and the paper white stemming out, those are planted in some soil, again, without drainage, so you're going to be watering sparingly, but it is just pretty, just so pretty. The spring came suddenly, bursting upon the world, as a child burst into a room with a laugh and a shout and hands full of flower. It's time to bloom. So this is, let me stop my, there, I couldn't find that before. Let me go back. There I am. Okay.
Hey, Denise.
So yes.
Let me just take this opportunity to tell everybody if they have any questions, they can type them in the chat box, and then we'll answer the questions at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to lift up this little pot, this little, as I said, I found this lone little paperwhite in my refrigerator. I had about 2 dozen when I started, but they've all bloomed. And this one, I guess I held on for just late in the season. But I took it out yesterday, took out my little pot, put it in and filled it with lukewarm water. And now that I've shown it to you, it's going to a sunny windowsill. And I should have a paperwhite in about 2 weeks. So that'll be exciting. Now, I also want to show you this forsythia that I started about 2 weeks ago. And it has been in bloom now for about 5 days. And it's been great. I've actually taken some branches and put it in other flower arrangements, cutting them down and everything. So I have some colorful arrangements throughout the house. But just beautiful when you have this in the gray of the winter. And it just makes such an architectural statement because of its height and buoyancy. So, and then I'm going to now move into my forsythia, because I have a new, let me get my baby orchid out of the way. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So these stems were just cut not too long ago. And I could have smashed them if I wanted to, but it's cold outside and I have a broken foot, so I haven't been outside doing much. So Don went out and got these. So once you have your stem and you bring them in, notice they're cut on the diagonal. And that one's not a good one for showing you the woody. Here's one. I don't know. Can you see that wooden center in there? Yeah. This is what you have to break up. That's what you have to break up with your scissors. So you want.
It looks like it's hollow.
It's hollow? Oh, you know, they've been in water for a while. We might have actually cut them out. But anyway, not cut them out. We don't cut the stem out. We just take this diagonal quarter cut with your sharp scissors, and that opens up the base so that water will be taken up in it. You need to do that with your lilacs too. If you bring them in the spring, I haven't experimented with lilacs forcing, but anyway, if you do bring them in, if you've ever brought them in and they were full of blooms and then they didn't do anything inside, it's because they weren't getting water because you didn't cut the stems. But that's all you have to do is take that little slice in your stem, you know, twice, and set it into your vase, set it in indirect lighting, make sure your water is always clean, and voila, you will have, this is actually, you know, greening up quite nicely from when we brought it in. And I do this in a staggered way. We brought those in about 2 weeks ago. We brought these in about a week ago. And then just a couple of days ago, we got another batch of forsythia that's in another room. So that's about what I love my forsythia bush for, it's at the edge of our property. And I'm always telling my husband, chop from the backside, so I can enjoy it in the spring as it's blooming out over the vegetable garden, and not keeping it untidy at the same time. Now I also have this star magnolia. We planted this star magnolia to memorialize my grandson's birth. And that was 21 years ago. So, but we love to bring them in. It's the first tree that flowers in our yard every year. And right now it's got these beautiful little cat skins on them, which is actually the flower bud of the magnolia. So same thing, you just simply cut them on the diagonal when you took them. Of course, we did that, getting them out. And then you take your scissors and cut them into quarters and set them into the vase. I only have a couple stems in this one, but I think that it will be beautiful when I have white flowers blooming in it. So that is how simple it is for you to bring flowers and color into your home in the winter time. So I'm happy to take questions if anybody has any, and hopefully inspired you to go out and do some foraging and look for some interesting stems from your cherry trees, from your magnolias, from your forsythias, any bush you care to choose.